Well, going back to Awankar, he had settled in the what was now considered the New Bhutani village, and this had occurred because the village elders had seen him, and they realized that this man was going to be a great hunter and was going to be a great leader, and so they devised a plan to keep him in the village. And what they did was they offered one of their most beautiful maidens to marry him. And he did, and he stayed. And it turned out that the elders were right, and he was indeed a great hunter, and he had magnificent oratorical skills. So great that there is actually a record of a case that Keanu mentions, that because of his abilities, the villagers in one village and the other, when they were fighting, Awankar was able to stay for many nights without tiring, discussing in a diplomatic way to solve the problem between these two villages to gain peace again. And he talked and presented no form of violence, but he just used his words to settle the dispute between these two villages without any bloodshed. And for this he was held as a hero. And later on, as the elder, he had a son by the name of Ini Satet. Now, Ini Satet had a second son named Tot Karam. And that's actually Kayano's grandfather's name. And Tot Karam was part of this event where in Ini Satet, his wife and his two kids were taken into slavery. And to explain that, during the Edo period, the Ainu people were drafted by the Shamo people as a source of labor force. And Atsukishi was the location where the Nibutani Ainu were taken as slaves. And because of this, the Ainu population in Atsukishi was greatly reduced due to the workload related deaths. As such, the Shamu people employed more Ainu from other areas such as Saru and Yufutsu areas. And of course there was people who did not want to send their men to work as labor force, people like Ini Satet. And because of this, the samurai had actually came down to Ini Satet's village and took his eldest son, Altok, and Altok's wife, and Tot Karam, to work as fishers for the Shamu. And when they arrived at the work site, there practically was no lodgings, no place for anything. The Ainu people that had arrived over there had to literally build a place to sleep and to take shelter from the elements. And after they had done all this, even still, the Ainu people were not allowed to rest. They were actually beaten awake when the morning stars were still glimmering and forced to work until they had no longer any visible light on the ground at night. Because of the harsh severity and for the things that he was forced to do, Tot Karam one day just decided to try and get sent home from labor via an injury. And the way he thought he did this was he tried to cut his finger. And he was nervous and he cut too much and ended up, cutting all of his forefinger in his left hand. And so he had no forefinger. And even so, when he cried out in pain, the master came by, looked at him and said, "You made such a fuss over such a small incident, go back to work." And, noticing that this didn't work, he eventually later on devised a plan by taking the poisonous bile from blowfish, and just covering his entire body with it a couple of times until his skin turned a grayish yellow and looked like he had some kind of disease known as jaundice. And of course, when the master saw this, he thought the man really did have disease and was going to die soon, and he didn't want to catch it, so he sent him home. And, he was overjoyed they didn't have to do it. But the other people recorded, such as Tot Karam's wife, literally said that the forced labor was incredibly harsh. And the Ainu were given pretty much a single bowl of rice a day, or leftover rice watered down into the form of porridge just to survive. And many children died of starvation and froze to death. And a lot more adults became very ill and weak and practically could barely work at all themselves. And so the Shanmu people really, really did a number on the Ainu people. And even still, it became worse. It became much worse. And we'll actually see that in Chapter 3, entitled Following Forced Evacuation. And in the Meiji era, the Shanmu people came over from Hokkaido looking for good farmland. They saw the Ainu people as an obstruction and decided to trick them into moving into very, very harsh, hard to inhabit land named Kaminu Kibitsu. And there are accounts from both Saichiru and Yoshi about if they weren't made to stay in this land, if they had not even left Niikapu, they would never have lost their family, nor experienced such hardships in daily life. You see, the place was so hard to inhabit that people gained lots of diseases, illnesses, colds, and just couldn't survive from their current location, and basically died off. And then Kayano moves further and talks a bit about his grandparents, and then about the Ainu names, saying they were currently like the Japanese names before they were very different. And he gives some examples about that, but I won't go into further depth on that since we have to move along. Reaching about 20 minutes here, 18 right now. A long absence from school is the last chapter, and mostly this is about Kayano's education. And initially, Kayano explains how he was almost not even allowed to start out the school to begin with, because the town didn't recognize him as a member or a citizen of it until they begged, like his family begged them to take it in, and that they would get proof and papers later. And of course, that was easy enough. And Kayano talks about his experiences with school life and how unpleasant it was for him to be there. The schools was predominantly Shamo schools, and the Shamo people would bully the Anu people in Hokkaido, like using names such as calling them Inu, which means dog, and Ainu, Inu. And a lot of the classes were harsh because Kayano was a poor, starving student. There were many times where he would get in trouble just seeing food that was supposed to be supposedly there for free, and he could just take it and eat it, or just taking food in general, and he would get punished for it severely. And eventually Kayano just apparently around for a year became kind of a student that was there but not. He would go and take care of his relatives or his friends' children and play with them, and he played hooky basically and was fed for it. And later on, Keanu explains in around 1935 that there were hardly any jobs available to the residents of Nibutani. But his older brother and his second brother and even his sister were able to get jobs. Of course, it was very hard for them. Keanu was going through primary school at the time, and eventually his older brother had died, and his mother became very profound in religion and put up many itinerary monks, such as those who passed by her house during the winter training. And because of that, I think it put an emphasis on Keanu's belief in the tradition to reinforce whatever teachings Hisu, his grandmother, gave him. And so I think most of the experience for Keanu's childhood pertained to the harshness and severity of him growing up from the Shamu people, and a kind of calling back to the nature of things in the Ainu traditions. And I think this is mainly a good foothold into beginning of how it became more of a bibliography and memoir of the Ainu people, despite it being through Kayanu's self-descriptions and analysis of his family. And that concludes the summaries of chapters 1 through 5.